The massive ship hung in space like a silver needle against the stars. Inside its main chamber, hundreds of alien beings sat in perfect circles around a glowing platform. Their voices created a strange mix of clicks, hisses, and musical tones that somehow formed words everyone could understand. Ambassador Zethkar stood at the center of the platform. His blue skin shimmered under the lights as he looked at each group of aliens. The Galactic Council had met like this for over 300 years, but today felt different. Today, someone was asking questions about the oldest rule in their law, books. "The humans have expanded again," said a voice from the crowd. The speaker was tall and thin, with 4 arms and silver eyes. "They now control 47 star systems. Soon they will have 50. Zethkar nodded slowly. "This is correct. Ambassador Thelwyn, the humans continue to grow, but they follow the treaties. They stay within the areas we have agreed upon." "But why do they get special treatment?" another voice called out. This one came from a creature that looked like a walking tree, with bark-like skin and leaves instead of hair. "Every other species must ask permission before they expand. The humans simply take what they want." A low rumble went through the chamber. Many of the aliens shifted in their seats. This was a question that had been whispered about for decades, but rarely spoken out loud. Zethkar raised one of his 6 arms for silence. "Because of the rule," he said simply. "The first and most important rule of our council. Never disturb the humans." Meanwhile, millions of miles away, Captain Jake Morrison sat in his captain's chair aboard the human ship Aurora. The bridge around him was clean and simple, with screens showing the emptiness of space. His crew worked quietly at their stations, checking systems and monitoring communications. Jake was 52 years old with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been in space for almost 30 years, ever since humanity had first met the Galactic Council. He remembered those early days when everything was new and scary. "Captain," said his communications officer, a young woman named Sandy Brooks, "we're getting a message from the Council. Standard diplomatic channel." "Put it through," Jake said, settling back in his chair. The main screen flickered and showed Ambassador Zethkar's blue face. "Greetings, Captain Morrison. I hope you are well." "Hello, Ambassador. What can I do for you today?" "The Council wishes to establish a small mining operation in Sector 7 of your outer territories. We would extract minerals from 3 uninhabited asteroids. All profits would be shared, equally with your government." Jake nodded. It was always like this. The aliens asked politely for everything, even things they could easily take by force. Their ships were bigger and their weapons were stronger, but they always asked. "I'll pass your request along to Earth Command," Jake said. "They should have an answer within a week." "Thank you, Captain. Your cooperation is always appreciated." The screen went dark, and Jake stared at it for a moment. His first officer, Commander Ryan Pierce, walked over and sat down beside him. "They could take those asteroids without asking," Ryan said quietly. "Their fleet could destroy us in hours if they wanted to." "But they won't," Jake replied, "because of what happened at New Denver." Ryan was younger than Jake and had only heard stories about New Denver. "Tell me again," he said. "I know the basic facts, but I want to hear it from someone who was there." Jake closed his eyes and remembered. It had been 28 years ago, but the memories were still fresh. "I was just a lieutenant then," he began. The Kethmore Empire decided they wanted the planet New Denver for themselves. It had good soil and lots of water. There were 50,000 human colonists living there, mostly farmers and their families. He paused and looked out at the stars. The Kethmore sent a battle fleet, 20 ships, all bigger than anything we had. They told the colonists to leave within 3 days or be removed by force. But the colonists refused, Ryan said. They did more than refuse. They got angry, really angry. Jake smiled grimly. The colony leader was a man named Pete Collins. He used to grow corn before he became mayor. When the Kethmore gave their ultimatum, Pete called a town meeting. Jake stood up and walked to the window that showed space outside. I was there as a military observer. I expected panic, maybe some people wanting to evacuate. Instead, Pete stood up and said something I'll never forget. He said, These aliens think they can just take our homes. They think we'll run away like scared children. Well, I've got news for them. Humans don't run. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of machinery. Everyone was listening now, even though they had heard this story before. What happened next was impossible. Jake continued. The colonists had 3 days to prepare for an attack by a superior alien fleet. They should have been slaughtered. Instead, they turned their entire planet into a weapon. How? Asked Sandy from her communications station. They used everything they had. Farm equipment became artillery. Tractors became mobile gun platforms. The grain silos were turned into missile launchers. Every man, woman, and teenager became a soldier. Jake returned to his chair. But the real genius was Mary Carter. She was the local sheriff, and she understood something the aliens didn't. Humans don't think like other species. When we're cornered, we don't follow the rules anymore. She coordinated the defense? Ryan asked. She did more than that. She turned the whole battle into chaos. The Kethmore had battle plans based on logical military thinking. Mary threw logic out the window. She had farmers pretend to surrender, then blow up their own barns when the aliens got close. She had children use toy drones to guide real missiles. She even convinced some colonists to ram their personal spacecraft into enemy ships. The bridge fell silent. This was the part of the story that always made everyone uncomfortable. The battle lasted 3 days, Jake said softly. When it was over, the entire Kethmore fleet was gone, destroyed. Not one ship escaped, and the humans had done it with farm equipment and pure stubbornness. That's when the council made the rule, Ryan said. Within a month, Jake confirmed. Every major power in the galaxy agreed. Never disturb the humans. Give them space. Let them grow, but never make them angry. Because when humans get angry, impossible things become possible. Far away, back in the council chamber, Ambassador E. Zethkar finished explaining the same story to the gathered aliens. The chamber was completely quiet when he finished speaking. Finally, the tree-like creature spoke again. So the rule exists because humans are dangerous? No, Zethkar said firmly. The rule exists because humans are unpredictable. Dangerous. Species can be defeated with superior firepower. Unpredictable species. He paused and looked around the chamber. Unpredictable species find ways to win that shouldn't be possible. The silver-eyed alien raised one of his forearms. But surely after 200 years we understand them better now. Zethkar's expression became very serious. Ambassador, Thelwyn, in 200 years of observation, we have learned exactly one thing about humans with absolute certainty. The moment you think you understand them, they will surprise you. He gestured to a screen that showed human space with its growing number of colonies and ships. The rule has kept peace in the galaxy for over 2 centuries. It has prevented wars, saved lives, and allowed all of us to prosper. I strongly suggest we continue to follow it. The chamber murmured agreement, but Zethkar noticed that not everyone looked convinced. Some of the younger ambassadors still had doubt in their eyes. He hoped they would be wise enough to listen to history, because Zethkar had read the classified reports from New Denver, the ones that weren't shared with the General Council, the ones that described exactly how creative humans could be when their survival was at stake. The rule wasn't just about keeping humans happy. It was about keeping the galaxy safe from what humans might become if they ever decided the galaxy was their enemy. As the council session ended and the various aliens returned to their ships, Zethkar remained on the platform. He stared at the display showing human space and whispered a prayer to his ancient gods. Let the rule hold, he said quietly. For all our sakes, let it hold. Prince Veltar of the Zephyrian Collective paced back and forth in his private chamber. His tall, muscular frame cast long shadows on the metal walls. His skin was dark purple, and 2 large horns curved back from his forehead. Everything about him screamed warrior, from his sharp claws to his fierce yellow eyes. 200 years, he growled to his advisor, General Kethmore. For 200 years we have bowed to these soft pink creatures. We have asked their permission to mine empty rocks. We have treated them like they are our equals. General Kethmore shifted nervously. He was smaller than the prince, but his body was covered in scars from many battles. Your Highness, the rule has brought peace to the galaxy. Trade has flourished. Wars have ended. Peace? Veltar spun around to face his general. What good is peace when it is built on fear of weaklings? The humans have no real army. Their ships are small, their weapons are primitive. Yet the entire galaxy trembles at the mention of their name. The prince walked to a large window that showed the stars outside. My father conquered 12 star systems before I was born. My grandfather united the collective through strength and courage. Now I am told I cannot expand our territory because some farmers on a distant planet once got lucky. Meanwhile on Earth, President Alex Chen sat in his office looking at reports that worried him. The walls around him were covered with screens showing data from across human space. His assistant, a young man named Bobby Kim, brought him another stack of papers. The intelligence reports are getting worse, Bobby said quietly. Captain Roy White's reconnaissance ships have spotted unusual activity along the buffer zone. Military buildups, supply convoys, communication blackouts. President Chen was a calm man in his 60s with silver hair and gentle eyes. But today he looked tired and concerned. How many species are involved? At least 6 major powers, sir. The Zephyrians are leading it, but they have support from the Vorthak, the Kelthani, even some of the smaller empires. Dr. Rachel Kim, Earth's top expert on alien behavior, entered the office. She was a small woman with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her hands shook slightly as she set down her tablet. I've been analyzing the communication patterns we've intercepted, she said. The aliens are coordinating something big. Their military leaders are talking to each other more than they have in decades. President Chen leaned back in his chair. What do you think they're planning? I think they're testing the rule, Dr. Rachel replied. Some of them believe humans are not as dangerous as the stories claim. They want to find out for themselves. Far from Earth, on the remote planet Kepler 442b, Dr. Ben Torres was having the worst day of his life. The human research station where he worked had been studying ancient alien ruins for 3 years. It was supposed to be safe, boring work. Today, it had become a nightmare. Ben crouched behind a broken wall, trying to stay hidden from the Zephyrian soldiers searching the ruins. His team of 12 researchers had been working peacefully when the alien ships arrived without warning. Now half his people were dead, and the rest were captured. His partner, archaeologist Kate Miller, lay wounded. Beside him, blood ran down her face from a cut on her forehead. Ben, she whispered, you have to get to the communications room. You have to warn Earth. I'm not leaving you, Ben said firmly. You have to. Kate grabbed his arm with surprising strength. This isn't random. They've been watching us for months. They know everything about our research, our schedules, our defenses. This was planned. Ben looked through a crack in the wall. Zephyrian soldiers were dragging the remaining humans toward their ships. These weren't just any soldiers. They wore the special armor of the collective's elite units. This was a military operation, not a random attack. They're taking prisoners, he said. Why would they take prisoners? Kate's eyes widened with understanding. They're going to study us. They want to learn our weaknesses before they attack the rest of human space. In the communication room of the research station, a young officer named Danny Walsh was desperately trying to send a message to Earth. His hands flew over the controls as Zephyrian soldiers pounded on the sealed doors behind him. Mayday. Mayday. He spoke into his headset. This is Research Station Kepler 442b. We are under attack by Zephyrian forces. They have captured most of our personnel. This appears to be a planned military operation, not a random raid. The door behind him began to crack. Sparks flew as the aliens used energy weapons to cut through the metal. They've been watching us for months, Danny continued, his voice getting more urgent. They know our routines, our equipment, our communication schedules. This is not a violation of the rule. This is preparation for something bigger. The door exploded inward. Zephyrian soldiers rushed in, their weapons raised. Danny grabbed his emergency transmitter, a small device designed to send one final message even if the main systems failed. Tell Earth, he shouted as the soldiers reached him. Tell them the rule is already broken. Tell them war is coming. The signal cut out, leaving only static. 3 days later, Captain Jake Morrison sat in his ready room aboard the Aurora, reading the emergency report that had just arrived from Earth Command. His face was grim as he called his senior officers to an emergency meeting. Commander Ryan Pierce entered first, followed by Lieutenant Sandy Brooks and Chief Engineer Mike Taylor. They all looked worried. "We've received a distress signal from Kepler 442b," Jake began without ceremony. "The research station has gone silent. The last message indicated they were under attack by Zephyrian forces." "That's impossible," Ryan said immediately. "Kepler 442b is inside the buffer zone. No alien military forces are allowed within 50 light-years of human space." "Apparently they don't care about the buffer zone anymore," Jake replied. He activated a holographic display showing the location of the research station. "Earth Command has ordered us to investigate. We're the closest ship." Sandy leaned forward in her chair. "Captain, if the Zephyrians really did attack a human research station, that's an act of war. The rule has been broken." "Maybe," Jake said carefully. "Or maybe something else is happening. Either way, we need to find out." Mike Taylor, the engineer, spoke up. "Sir, if this is the beginning of a war, we're not ready. The Aurora is an exploration ship, not a battleship. We have defensive weapons, but nothing compared to a Zephyrian war fleet." Jake stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the stars looked the same as they always had. Peaceful, eternal. But he had a feeling that peace was about to end. "I've been thinking about what Ambassador Zethkar said the other day," Jake said slowly. "About how humans are unpredictable. Maybe the aliens have forgotten why the rule exists. Maybe they think 200 years of peace means we've become soft." He turned back to his officers. "If they're testing us, they're about to get a very unpleasant surprise. Humans haven't changed. We've just been quiet." Ryan nodded grimly. "Orders, sir? Plot a course for Kepler 442b. Maximum speed, and send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we may need backup." As the Aurora changed course and accelerated toward the mysterious planet, Jake felt a familiar feeling in his stomach. It was the same feeling he had experienced as a young lieutenant at New Denver, just before the Kethmore fleet arrived. It was the feeling that everything was about to change. Behind them, hidden in the darkness of space, 3 Zephyrian scout ships followed at a safe distance. Their crews watched the Aurora's course change and immediately sent coded messages to Prince Veltar. The prince smiled when he received the reports. The humans were reacting exactly as his advisors had predicted. Soon he would have all the information he needed to plan his attack. "Let them come," he said to General Kethmore. "Let them find their precious research station. By the time they understand what has happened, it will be too late." What Prince Veltar didn't know was that humans had been preparing for this day for 200 years. Not with weapons or armies, but with something far more dangerous. They had been preparing with ideas, and when humans got angry, their ideas became very dangerous indeed. The news hit human space like a lightning bolt. Within 6 hours of Captain Jake Morrison's report from Kepler 442b, every human colony, station, and ship knew the truth. The research station was destroyed. 12 humans were dead. The Zephyrians had broken the rule. But what happened next surprised even the aliens who had been watching humanity for 2 centuries. Humans didn't panic. They didn't run. Instead, they got to work. Marine Colonel Sam Rodriguez stood in the command center of the border colony New Sparta, watching as civilian transports loaded with families prepared to evacuate. But these weren't ordinary evacuations. Each transport also carried mining equipment, industrial machines, and enough supplies to build new settlements. "Colonel," said his communications officer, Lieutenant Amy Chen, "we're getting volunteers faster than we can process them. Over 10,000 people have signed up for Operation Hornet's Nest in just the last 4 hours." Sam nodded grimly. Operation Hornet's Nest was a plan that had been sitting in human military files for decades. It was designed for exactly this situation. What to do if the galaxy ever decided to test human resolve. "What kind of volunteers?" Sam asked. "Everyone, sir. Factory workers, teachers, engineers, farmers, even kids as young as 16. They all want to help." On the factory world of New Birmingham, Maria Gonzalez stood before her workers in the main assembly hall. She was a small woman with graying hair and calloused hands, but her voice carried clearly to every corner of the huge room. "The aliens think they can scare us," she said simply. "They think if they kill a few of us, the rest will hide. Well, I've got news for them. My grandfather fought at New Denver. He taught me something important. When bullies come for your family, you don't hide, you fight back." The workers cheered, but Maria raised her hand for silence. "This factory makes farming equipment, tractors, harvesters, irrigation systems. Starting tomorrow, we're going to make something else. We're going to make the tools that will teach these aliens why the rule existed in the first place." Within hours, Maria's factory began producing what looked like farming equipment but wasn't. Tractors that could carry weapons, harvesters that could launch missiles, irrigation pipes that could be turned into railguns. Meanwhile, in the corporate headquarters of Williams Technology, CEO Paul Williams was making a decision that would change everything. He stood in his office overlooking the city of New Austin, holding a data pad that contained his company's most secret project. "Sir," said his assistant, Jennifer Park, "are you sure about this? The AI system isn't finished. We don't know if it will work properly." Paul looked out at the city below, where people were already preparing for war. Children were being evacuated, but their parents were staying behind to fight. Just like at New Denver, just like humans always did. "Release it," he said firmly. "Release everything. Patents, code, technical specifications. If we're going to fight a galactic war, every human needs access to our best technology." Within minutes, Paul's experimental AI system was downloading itself to computers across human space. It wasn't just any AI. It was designed to coordinate civilian resistance networks, to help ordinary people turn everyday objects into weapons. The BIME system had a simple name: Helper. And it was about to make the impossible possible. Tim Johnson was working his shift in the asteroid belt when the message came through. He was a miner, used to spending months alone in space with nothing but his ship and his mining equipment. When he heard about Kepler 442b, he didn't get angry. He got creative. "Helper, what can I do with 50 mining charges and a cargo ship?" he asked his computer. The AI system processed the question in seconds. "Multiple options available, Tim. Would you like to create area denial weapons, kinetic bombardment systems, or improvised nuclear devices?" Tim smiled grimly. "All of the above." On the colony world of New Portland, elementary school teacher Linda Brown was supposed to be evacuating with the other civilians. Instead, she was in her classroom with 12 of her brightest students, all volunteers whose parents had given permission for something unprecedented. "Kids," she said gently, "you know those science fair projects you've been working on? The sensor networks, the communication systems, the weather monitoring stations? We're going to use them to help protect our homes." 10-year-old Kevin Martinez raised his hand. "Mrs. Brown, my weather station can detect changes in air pressure. Could it detect alien ships entering the atmosphere?" "That's exactly what it could do, Kevin. And Sarah's communication network could link all our sensors together across the entire planet." Within hours, New Portland had a planetary defense network built from children's science projects, coordinated by an AI system, and operated by volunteers who had never seen military training. But the real surprise came from the most unlikely source of all. Carlos Rivera was a chef. He ran a small restaurant on the trading station Deep Rock, where he served food to travelers from across the galaxy. Carlos had always been proud that aliens enjoyed human cooking. Today, that knowledge was about to become a weapon. "Helper," he said to his kitchen computer, "I need to know something. Which human spices and foods are toxic to Zephyrian biology?" The AI system accessed decades of medical data from diplomatic dinners and trade meetings. 73 common human seasonings show toxicity to Zephyrian metabolism, Carlos. Capsaicin shows particularly severe reactions. Carlos looked at his spice rack and smiled. Time to cook up some trouble. The first major battle came sooner than anyone expected. Prince Veltar, confident after his easy victory at Kepler 442b, decided to test human defenses at the border colony of New Olympia. He brought 2,000 of his best warships against what his scouts reported as only 200 human vessels defending the colony. Admiral Beth Sullivan commanded the human defense from her flagship, the Liberty. She was a veteran of 30 years in space, but she had never faced odds like this. Her fleet was outnumbered 10-1. "Admiral," said her tactical officer, Commander Gary Webb, "enemy fleet is in attack formation. They'll be in weapons range in 20 minutes. Beth looked at the display showing the massive Zephyrian fleet approaching her small force. Any military academy would call this hopeless. The textbook said her fleet should retreat immediately. But Beth wasn't following textbooks today. "Signal. All ships," she said calmly. "Execute Chaos Protocol Alpha. All civilian vessels, begin your runs now." What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations, though no one would ever fully understand it. The human fleet didn't retreat. Instead, they charged directly at the much larger enemy force. But they didn't charge in formation. They didn't follow any recognizable attack pattern. Instead, each ship seemed to be following its own insane plan. Some ships pretended to surrender, then exploded when the aliens came close. Others launched cargo containers that turned out to be filled with explosives. A few actually rammed enemy vessels at full speed, their crews evacuating in escape pods at the last second. But the most effective attacks came from the civilian ships, cargo haulers, passenger transports, even personal yachts, that had been hastily converted into weapons by people who had never studied military tactics. Tim Johnson's mining ship arrived in the middle of the battle and began launching mining charges that had been turned into guided missiles. Each charge was small, but they came in swarms of hundreds. A cargo ship filled with Carlos Rivera's weaponized spices exploded inside a Zephyrian hangar bay, releasing clouds of capsaicin that sent alien crews into convulsions. Even Linda Brown's students contributed, their sensor networks providing targeting data that let human ships hit targets they couldn't even see. When the battle ended 6 hours later, Admiral Sullivan had lost 90% of her fleet. By every military standard, it was a crushing defeat, but she had also destroyed 1,500 Zephyrian ships. Prince Veltar, aboard his damaged flagship, stared at the battle reports in disbelief. His massive fleet had been savaged by a force 1/10 its size. Worse, the human tactics made no sense. His computers couldn't analyze them because they followed no logical pattern. "How?" he asked his tactical advisor. "How did they do this?" The advisor, a scarred veteran of many battles, looked pale and shaken. "Your Highness, they used farming equipment as weapons. They turned cooking spices into chemical weapons. They had children operating sensor networks." "That's impossible. No military force fights like that." "That's just it, Your Highness. They weren't fighting like a military force. They were fighting like ordinary people who got angry." Prince Veltar felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Not fear of death in battle, which was honorable. Fear of the unknown. Fear of an enemy that couldn't be understood or predicted. For the first time since he had begun planning this war, he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. But it was too late to stop now. The war had begun, and the humans were just getting started. 6 months after the war began, the Galactic Council gathered in emergency session. Ambassador Zethkar looked around the chamber at faces filled with fear and confusion. Every prediction about the war had been wrong. "The Zephyrian Collective has lost 60% of its fleet," reported Ambassador Thelwyn, his forearms shaking as he read from his datapad. "The Vorthak hegemony has withdrawn from the Alliance after losing 3 entire battle groups. The Kelthani Empire is requesting peace negotiations." Zethkar closed his eyes. He had tried to warn them. He had told them about the rule, about New Denver, about why humans should never be disturbed. Now the galaxy was paying the price for not listening. "How many human ships have been destroyed?" asked the tree-like ambassador from the Woodland Alliance. "We estimate they have lost 70% of their military vessels," Thelwyn replied. A murmur of satisfaction went through the chamber. Finally, some good news. However, Thelwyn continued, they now have more ships than when the war started. The Ueods. Chamber fell silent. That was impossible. No species could replace ships faster than they lost them in active warfare. "How is that possible?" demanded the Woodland ambassador. "They're not building ships in the traditional sense. They're converting everything. Cargo haulers, passenger transports, mining vessels, even personal spacecraft. Their entire civilian fleet has become their military. On the asteroid base called Freedom Station, General Tony Hayes stood before a massive holographic display showing the current state of human space. He was the grandson of Admiral Lisa Hayes, who had fought at New Denver decades ago. Like his grandmother, Tony understood something about warfare that alien military planners didn't. "Sir," said his aide, Lieutenant Scott Davis, "the latest reports from the front lines. Captain Kelly Davis and programmer Mike Foster are ready to begin their mission at Proxima Station." Tony nodded. The plan they were about to execute had been developed by civilians, not military strategists. It was so crazy that it just might work. "Any word from our science teams?" Tony asked. Dr. Janet Torres reports breakthrough progress on the exotic matter project. She says her brother would be proud. Tony's expression grew grim. Dr. Ben Torres had died at Kepler 442b, the incident that started this whole war. His sister Janet had volunteered to lead the most dangerous research project in human history. She was trying to weaponize the fundamental forces of the universe itself. At Proxima Station, engineer Kelly Davis checked her equipment one final time. She was a small woman with red hair and bright green eyes, but her hands were steady as she worked. Beside her, programmer Mike Foster typed rapidly on his portable computer. "The navigation AI is ready," Mike said. "Once we start the sequence, the ship will pilot itself to the target coordinates. We'll have exactly 7 minutes to evacuate." Kelly looked through the window at the cargo ship they had spent 3 weeks modifying. It looked normal from the UI outside, but inside they had built something that shouldn't exist according to known physics. "Helper," Kelly said to the station computer. "Confirm the exotic matter containment is stable. Containment field operating at optimal parameters, Kelly. However, I must remind you that this experiment has never been tested at full scale. The theoretical model suggests extreme danger." Mike laughed grimly. "Helper, everything we've done in this war has been theoretically impossible. That's why it works." Hundreds of light years away, Prince Veltar stood on the bridge of his new flagship. His old ship had been destroyed 3 months ago by a human attack that used modified asteroids as kinetic weapons. The humans kept finding new ways to hurt his forces. "Your Highness," said his sensor operator, "we're detecting a single human cargo ship approaching our position. It appears to be broadcasting surrender codes." Veltar studied the display. After 6 months of war, he had learned to be suspicious of anything humans did. They never surrendered normally. There was always a trick. "Scan the ship for weapons," he ordered. "Scans show no weapons, Your Highness. However, there are some unusual energy readings from the cargo bay." "What kind of energy readings?" "Unknown, sir. The patterns don't match anything in our databases." Veltar made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Bring the ship aboard. Prepare a boarding party. If the humans want to surrender, we'll accept their surrender. But search the ship thoroughly." As the human cargo ship was pulled into the hangar bay of the Zephyrian flagship, Kelly and Mike had already evacuated in a small escape pod. They watched from a safe distance as Zephyrian soldiers surrounded their modified ship. "Think it will work?" Mike asked nervously. "We're about to find out," Kelly replied. The Zephyrian boarding party approached the cargo ship cautiously. Their sensors detected no life signs inside, which was unusual for a surrender. The ship's cargo bay doors were sealed, but their cutting tools made quick work of the locks. Inside, they found what looked like a simple cargo container surrounded by strange machinery. The container was humming softly, and energy readings were off the charts. "Report to the Prince," ordered the boarding team leader. "We found some kind of experimental device." That was when the timer reached 0. The explosion wasn't like anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of fire and radiation, the exotic matter device tore a hole in the fabric of space itself. Reality folded inward, creating a pocket of twisted physics where the normal rules didn't apply. The Zephyrian flagship, along with 500 escort vessels, simply vanished. Not destroyed, not blown apart, but erased from existence as they were sucked into a micro-black hole that shouldn't have been possible to create. Prince Veltar had just enough time to realize what was happening before his ship was pulled into the impossible phenomenon. His last thought was a simple one. The humans had learned to weaponize the universe itself. The effect of Veltar's death rippled across the galaxy faster than the speed of light. The Zephyrian collective, leaderless and terrified, began to fragment into competing factions. Their alien allies started withdrawing from the war, as they realized they were facing an enemy that didn't follow the normal rules of physics. Dr. Janet Torres received the news in her laboratory on Earth. She was surrounded by equipment that was part science experiment and part factory, turning out weapons that existed only in theoretical physics textbooks. The Proxima Station experiment was a complete success, her assistant, Dr. Gary Mitchell, reported. The exotic matter cascade worked exactly as predicted. Janet nodded, but she didn't look happy. How many enemy ships were destroyed? 501, including their command vessel. And how many of our people? Kelly and Mike evacuated successfully. No human casualties. Janet stared at the data on her screens. In 6 months, her research team had created weapons that could bend space and time. They had turned human curiosity and creativity into tools of war that alien scientists couldn't understand, let alone counter. "Send a message to General Hayes," she said quietly. "Tell him the new weapons are ready. For mass production. We can have 50 exotic matter devices ready within a month." Dr. Mitchell looked concerned. "Dr. Torres, are you sure about this? These weapons are incredibly dangerous. One mistake could destroy an entire star system." Janet thought about her brother Ben, killed on a peaceful research mission by aliens who thought humans were weak. She thought about the 12 innocent researchers who had died simply because Prince Veltar wanted to test human resolve. "The aliens started this war because they thought we were harmless," she said firmly. "It's time to show them exactly how wrong they were." Meanwhile, in the wreckage of what had been Prince Veltar's fleet, automated Zephyrian distress beacons sent their final messages into space. The signals carried a simple warning that would be heard by every major power in the galaxy. The humans have become something new. They fight with weapons that should not exist. They turn science itself into a tool of war. We should have listened to the rule. We should never have disturbed them. The message reached the Galactic Council just as Ambassador Zethkar was preparing his resignation. He had failed to keep the peace. He had failed to prevent the war. Now he would watch as the galaxy learned what happened when humans stopped being peaceful explorers and became something far more dangerous. As he sealed his final report, Zethkar wrote one last warning for future generations. The rule existed to protect the galaxy from humanity's potential, not to protect humanity from the galaxy. We have awakened something that should have been left sleeping. May whatever gods watch over us have mercy on what we have done. The war was far from over, but the balance of power had shifted forever. Humanity had shown the galaxy that they could do more than just survive. They could evolve, adapt, and create new forms of warfare faster than their enemies could understand. The age of human innocence was ending. The age of human dominance was about to begin. 2 years after the war began, Ambassador Zethkar stood in the ruins of what had once been the Galactic Council's greatest meeting hall. Half the building was gone, destroyed not by weapons, but by simple neglect. Most of the member species had stopped coming to council meetings months ago. Today was different. Today, the remaining aliens had gathered to discuss something no one had expected to ever happen. The Zephyrian collective wanted to surrender. "The message came through this morning," reported Ambassador Thelwyn, his once proud voice now barely a whisper. "What's left of their government is requesting immediate peace negotiations. They're willing to accept any terms." Zethkar looked around the nearly empty chamber. Where once hundreds of alien species had gathered, now only 12 ambassadors remained. The rest had either been destroyed in the war or had simply gone home to prepare for whatever came next. "And the humans?" he asked. "What is their response?" "They have agreed to meet," Thelwyn replied. "President Alex Chen himself will conduct the negotiations, but they want the talks held on Earth." A shiver went through the remaining ambassadors. No alien delegation had set foot on Earth since first contact over 2 centuries ago. The humans had always met other species in neutral space, keeping their homeworld private and protected. If they were inviting the galaxy to Earth, it meant something had changed. 1 week later, Zethkar found himself aboard a small diplomatic shuttle approaching the blue and green world that had become the most feared planet in the galaxy. As they passed through the outer solar system, he saw things that made his hands shake. Earth wasn't just defended anymore. It was surrounded by a vast network of space stations, shipyards, and weapons platforms that stretched from the inner planets to the asteroid belt. Ships moved between them in endless streams, carrying materials and personnel for projects he couldn't identify. "By the old gods," whispered his aide, looking at the sensor readings. "How many ships do they have?" "Too many to count," Zethkar replied. He had studied the intelligence reports. In 2 years of war, humanity had gone from having a few hundred vessels to possessing fleets that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever assembled. But the ships weren't the frightening part. The frightening part was that they all looked different. Every human vessel was unique, as if each one had been designed by a different mind with a different idea of what a starship should be. The shuttle landed at a facility called New Geneva, built on what had once been a small city in Europe. As Zethkar stepped onto the landing pad, he was greeted by 2 humans in simple business suits. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador," said the woman, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. "I'm Secretary of State Amy Wilson. This is General Lisa Park, our military advisor." Zethkar carefully shook their hands, noting how calm they seemed. These humans showed no signs of stress or exhaustion despite fighting a galactic war for 2 years. "President Chen is waiting for you," Amy continued. "But first, he wanted you to see something." They led him to a vehicle that moved silently through the city. What Zethkar saw through the windows amazed him. The city was bustling with activity, but it wasn't the desperate activity of a species at war. People walked calmly through parks. Children played in playgrounds, and cafes served customers as if nothing unusual was happening. "Your people seem very peaceful for a species at war," Zethkar observed. General Lisa smiled. "That's because we're not really at war anymore, Ambassador. We're just finishing some cleanup work." The vehicle stopped at a building that looked like a university, rather than a government facility. Inside, President Chen waited in a simple office with large windows overlooking a garden. He was an older man with kind eyes and a gentle manner that made it hard to believe he commanded the most powerful military force in galactic history. "Ambassador Zethkar," President Chen said, standing to greet him. "Thank you for coming. Please sit down. Can we offer you anything? Water, perhaps?" Zethkar sat carefully in a chair that had been designed for his alien anatomy. Someone had taken the time to make him comfortable, which was not what he had expected from humanity's war leaders. "Mr. President, I must ask directly, what are your terms for ending this war?" President Chen looked out the window at the peaceful garden. "The war is already over, Ambassador. Has been for months. What we're discussing today is what comes next." "I don't understand." President Chen activated a holographic display that showed the current state of the galaxy. Most of it was colored blue, representing human-controlled space. "In the past 6 months, we've established peaceful contact with over 200 worlds that were previously part of the Zephyrian Collective or their allies. Not through conquest, but through invitation. They asked us to protect them." Zethkar stared at the display. "But the fighting continues. Our reports show active combat in dozens of systems." "Those aren't wars," General Lisa explained. "Those are police actions. We're removing the last few military leaders who refuse to accept that the old system is finished." President Chen touched another control, and the display zoomed in on specific systems. "The Vorthak hegemony dissolved 3 months ago. The component species voted to join our confederation. The Kelthani Empire split into 12 independent worlds, all of which have requested human protection. Even the Woodland Alliance has asked us to mediate their territorial disputes." "What about the Galactic Council?" Zethkar asked weakly. "What about it?" Amy Wilson replied. "You're welcome to continue meeting. But most of your former member species are now part of our alliance. We found that voluntary cooperation works better than forced compliance. Zethkar felt the weight of centuries crashing down on him. The Galactic Council had ruled space for over 1,000 years. Now it was simply irrelevant. "What do you want from us?" he asked. President Chen leaned forward, his expression serious but not threatening. "We want what we've always wanted, Ambassador. To be left alone to grow and explore in peace. The difference is that now we're strong enough to guarantee that peace ourselves." He stood and walked to the window. The old rule was, never disturb the humans. The new rule is simpler. Treat everyone fairly, follow the laws we all agree on, and prosper together. And if someone breaks the new rule? President Chen's voice remained gentle, but his words carried the weight of 2 years of impossible victories. Then they'll discover what happens when you disturb a species that has learned to weaponize creativity itself. That evening, Admiral Jake Morrison sat in his quarters aboard the Aurora, now flagship of the largest space fleet in galactic history. His ship was in orbit around Earth, part of the ceremony marking the official end of the war. His old friend, Commander Ryan Pierce, joined him for dinner, something they did every few weeks to remember the old days. "Do you ever miss it?" Ryan asked. "The way things were before the war?" Jake looked out at the stars where human ships now traveled freely through space that had once been forbidden to them. "Sometimes. It was simpler then. We knew our place in the galaxy. And now?" Jake smiled. "Now the galaxy knows our place. We're not the quiet neighbors anymore, Ryan. We're the ones keeping the peace." On distant worlds across the galaxy, former enemies worked alongside human administrators to rebuild societies torn apart by centuries of rigid hierarchy. Children who had grown up fearing the unknown humans now learned human languages and studied human history. The old Galactic Council had maintained order through fear and strict rules. The new Human Confederation maintained peace through something much simpler: the promise that everyone who cooperated would be protected, and everyone who caused trouble would face the consequences. Ambassador Zethkar completed his final report. To the few remaining council members that night, his words would be studied by historians for generations. The humans have done something unprecedented in galactic history. They have created an empire based not on conquest or dominance, but on the simple idea that peace is more profitable than war. They offer protection to those who want it, trade to those who need it, and justice to those who seek it. He paused in his writing, remembering the garden he had seen outside President Chen's window. Even in the heart of their new empire, humans still made time for quiet beauty. "Perhaps this is why the rule existed," he continued. "Not to protect the galaxy from human aggression, but to give us time to prepare for human leadership. They are not perfect, but they are better than what came before." As night fell over Earth, President Chen stood in that same garden, looking up at the stars. Somewhere up there, human ships carried diplomats and scientists to worlds that had never seen peace before. Children were learning to read in schools built by human engineers. Former enemies were becoming friends. The rule had been broken, but something better had taken its place. The galaxy was still dangerous, still full of unknowns and challenges. But for the first time in centuries, it was also full of hope. And that, President Chen thought as he watched the stars, was a very human thing to give the universe.